We are back with another episode of Boardrooms and Breakthroughs, the podcast where we dive deep into discussions with visionaries, leaders, and changemakers who are redefining the way we work. Today, I'm joined by Gautam Ganglani, the CEO of Right Selection, a notable publisher, and the author of Breaking Bread. He's here with us to talk a little bit about his personal journey from being bullied as a child in London to setting up and establishing a hugely successful business. We're going to be tapping into success stories, his interactions with some of the most well-known speakers and authors in the world, and really define what personal branding means to them and the power of unlocking an authentic storytelling. Let's dive in. Gautam, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rowan. An absolute pleasure and privilege to be on your podcast.
Good to have you here. I mean, we've been friends for a long time. I'm familiar with your work, but I'd love for our listeners to get a glimpse of what it's like to be a book publisher, as well as someone who's worked with so many of those heavyweights in the self-development space.
Thank you so much. Well, it's certainly been a journey. I say a journey of transformation because it's a 30-year journey. It's a father and son family business. And the initial 10 years started off as a bookshop here in Dubai. And we partnered with over 200 companies to help them build a library of self-help, non-fiction books that would either help people become better versions of themselves, become better leaders, and at the same time help the companies either grow, strategize, innovate, create, whatever the areas are in the non-fiction space. 10 years into the business, we then said, what next? Mm-hmm. And that's when we said, let's start bringing the authors of the best-selling books for live events, because we saw a certain aspiration that people who were, inspired or improved or progressed, a certain excitement that I'd love to meet that author who's helped change my life, helped me become a better version, helped me solve a problem or have a breakthrough. And so we said, let's bring in the authors of the books which are popular. And that led on to the next phase of the business where we had sort of public seminars with an open-ended invitation where people from corporates or individual entrepreneurs could come along. And then in the third decade, it sort of transformed into sort of the larger corporates, the government departments, wanting to bring some of these eminent speakers into live events.
Wow.
And that led on to sort of executive coaching. So it's been an organic growth from a bookstore to a conference and seminar organizer, to sort of a management agency, and then into executive coaching. So yeah, it's been
a lovely flow of events.
Yeah.
But take me back a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned something in your personal website as well as in your book about your experience about being bullied in London.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand how your experiences have shaped your own learning and how you've turned it into this positive thing, because I see you doing so much in the personal development space, and I'd just love to hear a little bit more about your experience there.
Sure. Thank you. I mean, I was born and brought up in London, UK, and that comes with its share of opportunities and challenges. And at the age of 13, the school I was in went through a very difficult phase for about 3 years where I was bullied, I was teased, I was humiliated, made fun of. And that resulted in my self-esteem being demoralized, and your sort of self-worth, your confidence, everything was depleted. And, mentally, emotionally, physically, you were not really yourself because you were isolated. And so that experience was a very difficult, painful experience. And fortunately, in our joint families that we live in, I had the chance to speak to my dad about it. And I told him that nothing's making any sense. I've got very few friends, and I'm just not comfortable in the environment I'm in. And he said to me that, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice which can help you not only in this situation, but in the rest of your life. I said, wonderful. I'd love to learn what can I do differently to help me improve the situation that I'm in. And he said, before I share those pieces of advice, I want you to understand there are 2 things that are constant in life, not only now, for the rest of your life. I said, yeah, what are those? And he said, change and challenges. He said, change is constant and challenges are constant. No matter how successful you become, you will always have change and challenges. And for lack of a better example, COVID in the last few years that we had in 2020, 22, you saw whatever status you are in your life from wherever you are in the world, change was taking place. And there were a lot of challenges that we all had to face. No one was exempt. And so to me, throughout one's life, everyone's facing change and challenges, change in relationships,
Change is the only
change
constant.
in business, change in lifestyle, change in many areas of your life, and respective challenges.
Of course.
So my dad said the three-piece advice I'd give you with your current situation is, firstly, surround yourself with the right people.
Agree.
People who uplift you, encourage you, inspire you, help you be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Minimize your time from what we call toxic people or people who, don't help you be your natural self. Secondly, continuously learn. And, in those days, it's learning from people, from books. Today, you got podcasts.
Yeah.
You've got, various ways of learning. So continuously learning. Learning is a lifetime journey. Things keep changing
100%.
as we see. Change is just, in fact, at the speed of light today. And third and most is take action. A lot of us read books, attend events, and then what?
And how much do
You're
we
inspired,
implement?
and you're like, then what? You may listen to this podcast, and it triggers some thoughts and ideas. What's important is taking action.
action.
When you take action, you create new value, new experiences, which ultimately leads to new results and progress.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's almost like the process of manifestation through doing, through aligned
Absolutely.
action, and also aligning yourself with people, like you said, who have shared values and interests.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I mean, your father has clearly had such a profound influence in your life. And I just wanted to talk a little bit also about, since you mentioned books and book writing, how important is storytelling these days in line with the personal branding and personal development journey? Do you see storytelling changing over the next few years?
I think storytelling has and will always be omnipresent in any form of communication to inspire, to educate, to engage, whether it's in the form of a book where you're telling stories, whether it's in the form of being a speaker on stage, whether it's in your articles that you submit or your LinkedIn posts, in every form of communication, verbal or non-verbal, people are engaged with stories. You go to the theater or the cinema, it's a story that's being shared in some format, and
Yeah.
the way that story is being shared, it makes it a great movie.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
way a speaker speaks on stage, he could have fantastic content. When he shares a story which supports the content, it's relatable. Many of our great speakers share stories, like Ron Kaufman, who you know very well. He used to share stories from banks, airports, and hotels because he said
I love the stories.
everyone's, and they were humorous.
Yeah.
And that also is another part of storytelling. It needs to have an emotional connect, either through humor or an emotion which, connects with them, in that manner.
I still remember at one of the events that, in fact, you'd invited me to with Ron, and he had this one tagline that stood out, which was surprise and delight
Yeah.
your customers in the context of customer experience. And it stuck with me
Yeah.
just by mere virtue of the way he said or told the story.
Absolutely.
He relayed it in this very interesting, fun, and engaging way that, that memorability just clicked.
Correct.
So, what, in your opinion, having worked with, several self-development authors, coaches, and in this space for such a long time, what is the secret sauce to a good book?
To a good book. Many of the great authors who are great speakers that we have represented and have had the pleasure of having conversations, I've asked them a similar question to really understand really what does it take to, have a best-selling book, or what does it take to have a book that resonates with audiences globally, not only just in whichever region you're in. And, some of them have written, you can take Marshall Goldsmith. He had written 7 or 8 books before his best-selling book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So it's not like his first book was a success.
Wow, okay.
And nobody would have heard of those other books. Today, he's written 15 books, but only 4 of them are well known by most people. So, partially it's about persistently writing and
Yeah.
finding the one that clicks. I won't say it's the first time you get the right book. Today, he's sought after from publishers telling him, when's your next book? Because
Yeah.
now he's written that book. Now he's a brand
Right.
where the publishers want to be associated. But that first book, I wouldn't call it luck, but I would say it's more about persistence. Because if you are persistent in sharing, you learn from every book you write. Some work, some don't. But storytelling is a key part of the books. To me, when I've written my book a few years back called Breaking Bread, my idea in that book, learning from relating to your question, was really I said, okay, I want to think that I want a person who doesn't read books to be able to read my book. So that means I want it to be short enough. I want the font to be large enough. And I want there to be stories in the book which are relatable to people who want to build meaningful relationships. And when I look back, books like Who Moved My Cheese,
Oh, yeah.
Till Today, Fish, Philosophy, Work Made Fun Gets Done, Whale Done,
Yeah.
the 1 Minute Manager series, all these books have been timeless. They are selling way beyond the lifetime of many of the authors,
Well, they're concise, they're memorable, and they're relatable.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's my
Yeah.
humble take on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think it's about a universal appeal. Some people's books are written with industry specific or niche, then they're unlikely to they'll become bestsellers within that niche. But a universal bestseller, yeah, to me it needs to be something that is cross cultural.
Yeah.
It's simple to read, yet profound. It has stories that are compelling, and then ultimately, there's so many books out there. So to me, marketing your book through speaking engagements is really a key part, which people write a book and say, then what?
Yeah.
Many people write a book and they're like, how do I sell the book?
Yeah.
And it's really important that you have a
Getting the
plan.
message out.
Getting the message out as part of your personal brand building
Speaking my
journey.
language.
Yeah, I mean, you write the book, which is itself, I appreciate a project. It's not that you just press a button and you write a book. So there's a 3, 6 month, 9 month, 1 year journey sometime if you have an author coach with you. Once you've written the book, you got to have a plan. And I'm working with 2 authors now where they're like, okay, my book's ready. Can you help me launch the book, help it reach the right people? And that's really important because the first, they say 5 to 10,000 copies you sell of a book, that's really critical to then having a domino effect, then it can sell organically.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
At least in India, until it's sold 10,000 copies, it's not listed as a recognized bestseller, not about being the number one, but being a recognized, recommended book in the bookstores.
I'm going to ask a cheeky question now. You've just prompted me to do so. New York Times bestseller titles, it just feels like nowadays there's a lot of bestsellers coming through. What defines a true bestseller, and how are these books scored or ranked, just to someone who's sort of a novice to the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of bestsellers on certain lists. Like you'll have bookstore bestsellers, like call it Crosswords in India, or maybe a Borders bestseller or a Magrudy's bestseller. Then that's based on the sales of books that are selling in their store. The top 10 nonfiction, the top 10 fiction, the top 10 children. It's based on authentic sales in their stores. But if you take to a New York Times bestseller book, then they would obviously be doing numbers where they tie up with the publishers, they tie up with Amazon, and get real-time numbers on actual sales of the book. Because it's only based on the actual physical or online sales that make a book a bestseller. Otherwise, it's another book on the shelf. So to me, these are authentic numbers. To my knowledge, the only distinction I'm making is like a bestseller in Dubai at Magrudy's may not necessarily always be a bestseller at New York Times. New York Times would be fundamentally based on results from the publishers and Amazon, I guess. Locally, you could have books which are written, which are really regional centric, could also become bestsellers.
Wow. Okay. So this is gold for anyone who's listening, who's contemplating writing their own book.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to aspiring authors, Gautam?
To aspiring authors, so as in people who are looking to become authors, you'd say?
Yes, people who are looking to build their personal brands, elevate their personal brand, perhaps ideally through a book,
Sure. I mean, I think
since we're on the book topic.
absolutely. No, I think it's a great question. And for me, it's something that I do when people say, Gautam, I want to write a book. I say, before you decide to actually write the book, I'd like to learn why do you want to write the book? Because understanding your purpose and your why, because everyone has a different why. There are people who want to write a book. I know one gentleman here who's written a book because it's his legacy. He's 70 plus. He wanted to share his story. He didn't know how to write the book himself. So, through an author coach, he was interviewed over 6 months and his book was written. And he's not concerned about, the book sales per se. He's using it primarily as a gift book, but it's become a very popular gift book because the story is so inspiring.
Lovely.
But for him, it was for the legacy of the book and to reach as many people to hear his story.
So he never wrote with the intention of selling it. He wrote with the intention of sharing with his loved ones.
Correct. Exactly. And it's
wonderful.
reached, the community, and then it's from then the book, obviously, if it's interesting, then people buy it as gift books. So that's one reason. Another reason is the people who are looking to become speakers or coaches or trainers. That's a big industry that we know about. And those are people wanting to elevate their profile because author, the short form is an authority. And the assumption, and
I love
generally,
that, by the way.
yeah,
I don't think many people click to that.
click
I mean,
author as an
self-included, it's
authority.
like,
Yeah,
author,
to me,
authority
people
makes
say
perfect sense.
because I've written a book on relationship building and building meaningful. Gautam, you would be a good conversationalist. I see you meeting people, mixing with kids or meeting with adults of all ages across culture, and that comes very naturally to me because that's my personality. So being an author of a book called Breaking Bread, Building Meaningful Relationships connects to that. So the same way as an authority, Marshall Goldsmith has written a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
You there.
It talks about 20 behavioral changes that every leader needs to become the best leader or the best version of themselves. So people will connect that he is the number one leadership coach in the world because he helps leaders become even better. And it connects back to the book. So coming back to your question is, let's understand why you're writing the book. Is it for a legacy? Is it to help excel your career? Many speakers, when they got that book, Marshall's fees went up 5x to my knowledge.
Incredible.
The moment that book was a bestseller. So his previous 6 books had no meaning. He was already a speaker since 30, 40 years. But 20 years ago when the book What Got Here came out, his career went exponential growth both in fees and demand for him as a speaker globally.
Well, it's like you said, there's no such thing as luck. I guess it's preparation meets opportunity. And
Absolutely.
kept writing and writing and writing until you did that. So you've said one thing was knowing their why and their purpose.
Yeah.
The other is being able to showcase their expertise or elevate their experience.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else?
Well, I would say that
we
once you've written a book, it gives you credibility ultimately. So, because of when people have written a book, then they get interviewed, be it on podcasts, be it in the newspaper, in the media, be it on LinkedIn. So it's a great credibility for your website, for your social proof of being an expert in that specific domain, which is great because that credibility helps to elevate your brand. It's like because of any author's book, it elevates their brand and the awareness. So that's something which will add value. Even as an entrepreneur, it's like, oh, you're an author. It's like, wow, that's certain level of credibility. Although there are more and more authors coming up now, but it's still seen as not everyone's been able to put pen to paper and actually write a book.
Of course.
So I think, ultimately, other than the why and other than, the purpose, but it ultimately gives you the credibility and you do get good media coverage, and it's a great gift to give people.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
I think it's there's nothing more personal than a personalized, story and sharing something of your own knowledge and experience with someone else.
Absolutely.
So it's a wonderful gift.
Some people
especially
even
if it's
call
coming
it the
from
most
you.
professional premium business card. and I say that not for the sake of anything else, because business cards, when you exchange, are just entered into a database. When you give a book which is personally signed, the person reads it, fantastic, but at least they're going to keep it on their coffee table. They're going to read it, gift it, share it, and it's something that gets them to know you a little bit more than from a business card or from a website. So I think, a book gives insights into the person who's written the book as well, which is a great way to build relationships.
That's an interesting point. So, how honest should these books or just simply communication get? Right now, personal branding is all the buzz, and people are curious about it. They're wanting to know how they can elevate their personal brand, show up authentically. At the same time, how much is too much? Where does it get muddled with the business context and the personal context?
That's an interesting question. Again, I guess once you have the clarity of if someone's taken the responsibility that I want to build my personal brand and they know why they're doing that, then you've got to obviously make sure there's consistency across platforms. It's not like I'm one persona on LinkedIn, I'm another persona here. So someone building a business profile will focus on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn becomes the place of you sharing consistent content. To me, my LinkedIn grew 5x over COVID because I just decided to post 3 posts every week consistently for 2 years. So organic growth went and happened because you're sharing your learnings, your observations, your reflections. It gets them to know you better, but it's an authentic share, and people connect with authenticity. They connect with stories. They connect with content which is coming consistently. So to me, those are
absolutely. In my communications, my corporate career, I've worked with a number of C-suite executives to help them elevate their presence and rework some of the LinkedIn content, obviously, as well as other formats of content. How would you say, or what would your approach be to to positioning leaders? Should they talk about their personal stories, and how much?
Yeah, I think, there's no one size fits all with that answer. And I think, at the end of the day, whatever you're comfortable to share, people do appreciate getting to know people behind the scenes. And obviously, at the same time, you want to respect your boundaries and what you
And
share.
personal values.
Your personal values, your personal life, your family, etc. So, but getting to know your hobbies or your interests, and also to understand that you are authentic in terms of the way you live your life. You in the business life, you're talking about being a great role model. Hypothetically, you also want to make sure that what you share reflects that correctly as well. And otherwise,
Absolutely.
it seems like a gap or a misrepresentation, or it creates confusion.
Yes.
So I think you want to share because people relate to people personally. Like if you look at LinkedIn, people's personal profiles will have far more influence than their companies. I mean, I used to think that I got to have a company. You have a company website, but you have a company profile on LinkedIn. But your personal LinkedIn is far more followers, far more influence. Even people you say go to see, be it any of the famous people from Elon Musk to Richard Branson to any of the people are interested in what are they doing, what happens behind the scenes, and that creates a lot of curiosity.
Yes.
So you want to be able to share something that
What's
keeps them
behind the scenes that makes them relatable and personable as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I talk a lot about themes related to return to work as a fairly new mum myself, with one on the way as well. And I do feel that people are curious. People are curious naturally. It's not the only angle, because there are multi facets to our lives and we are multifaceted. So it's really about, in my opinion, sharing the different parts of who we are, and because we are some of all those parts. And
Absolutely.
so it's, perhaps like you've said, it's the tasteful representation
Yeah.
in line with our own values, and being able to share some of the stories that just show the various facets of our lives and showcase that in a natural way that's authentic
Absolutely.
and credible, like to who we are.
Absolutely.
So just coming to your points, I mean, we've talked a lot about the authorship piece, and you mentioned LinkedIn, of course, as a platform. How do you see LinkedIn evolving in terms of usage now, and with AI coming in as well? Are you seeing more interest in using LinkedIn as a platform for personal branding?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I see LinkedIn has evolved for what LinkedIn was 10 years, 15 years back, and what it's become. LinkedIn was predominantly only for HR and recruitment purposes. It's now become the business social media platform. And yes, HR were the prominent ones, but now I think everyone in business, be it entrepreneurs, be it corporate, are on LinkedIn. Some are more active than others. So at the end of the day, I think it's a platform that is here to stay. And they, as with all platforms, know that they got to keep evolving with current trends, with current behaviors, with people's attention span. So you see things like the videos and the LinkedIn lives were very popular during the pandemic, and now I don't see so many LinkedIn lives. So that way, I think every platform, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or the other mediums that are there, everyone's always evolving their platform because they realize that people will comfortably switch.
Well, it's like we said at the beginning, the only
Yeah.
thing that's constant is change. And
Change,
so there's
absolutely.
our behaviors change, our needs change,
Yeah.
the environment is constantly changing around us. And so it's really helpful to stay on top of those trends,
Correct.
adapt and
Yeah.
improvise.
Yeah. And I think there's a big difference because B2B and B2C, I mean, I see consumer-driven businesses are on Instagram, whereas business-driven influencers are on LinkedIn. And I
Yes.
think that's clear. Unless there's another platform that comes out with something that's unique, compelling, innovative, that's attractive, then I just think LinkedIn has to keep innovating itself and keep the current influencers active and engaged.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think each of these platforms are also experimenting with different formats based on the appeal, like you said,
Absolutely.
and based on the interaction. So you've got LinkedIn that is very much dedicated to the business environment and B2B, which again, we're seeing, some sort of trends coming in, infiltrating from the personal branding, personal influence and experience. That's also sort of infiltrating through business because it's correlated after all, and people buy from people. So they're
Absolutely.
wanting to have a peek behind the curtains into who the other person is, or who they're buying from, or who's
Correct.
leading a company,
Yeah.
which lends to the employer brand. We've talked about book writing. We've covered, LinkedIn. I'd also love to hear, in terms of public speaking, because you've also worked with a number of public speakers. What is or what lends to a standout performance on stage? How do you know they're exuding confidence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of speakers out there, and all of them, you know, have their own USP in terms of delivery style. You know, we have Ron Kaufman, who is highly energetic. He's animated, and he provides humor in his storytelling, and that's what connects with some audiences. So that's one example. Someone like Marshall Goldsmith, he has a lot of stories and humor in his presentation. Um, and he walks around the room, even if it's a room with 100, 200, 300 people, as opposed to being on stage. And he finds that has kept people engaged. So, you know, they're totally two different personalities. I think, firstly, is to be on stage and for people to come and listen to you today's times, you know, where time is even more precious than ever before. You know, first they want to know who's the speaker, you know, is he a renowned author? What's his topic? What his theme? So first is to even have the right to have an audience, which itself is a challenge. To be very honest, it's not just by default people show up. And once you're there, then you're like, how do you engage the audience? I mean, so things like clarity, tonality, energy, engagement, storytelling, and being culturally sensitive. You know, in a place like Dubai and the Gulf region, it's multicultural society. So you got to make sure that your accent, the speed with which you're speaking, doesn't disconnect. What may work in the U.S. may not necessarily work here.
That's a great point.
So all these
Tone and
all these
delivery.
things are really important. I've seen great speakers suddenly not be so great here because the speed of their speech was so much that people couldn't grasp, and they could be world renowned. And at the same time, I have people who are stay on stage and it's a monologue. Now, if it's a 30-minute keynote, it's fine. You're gonna be deliver. You gotta deliver with high energy. But the
Course.
longer the time, then you need to be versatile in your delivery style. That's why, coming to speakers, there are some speakers who are great with large audiences, some who are really good with workshops, and some are versatile. Where I've seen Ron Kaufman with 10 people, and I've seen Ron Kaufman with 1,000 plus people. When you have those two audiences, not every speaker can do that, because what you do with 10 people and when you do 1,000 is completely different.
Of course.
So you need that,
How you
skill
engage
set.
the audience is
Exactly.
knowing the audience and also the appeal to different group sizes.
Yeah.
The dynamics change, I'd imagine, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. So different in a keynote, a workshop, a training. So there are different formats of experience, so that you want to make sure the speaker is, adaptable to those different, options.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, on a few sort of last closing notes, I'd
Sure.
love to, of course, last but not the least, come to your book. What inspired you to write Breaking Bread?
Yeah, actually, I've been working with authors and speakers for over 20 years before I wrote my book, and everyone said, Gautam, you're representing authors, speakers. When are you writing your book? And I was like, what would I write about? I just wasn't sure, and I was, busy in my own space with the business growth organically. But come COVID, I suddenly had a lot of time in my hands at home. I'm like, there's never going to be a better time than now to put this book together. And just suddenly I was speaking. A lot of people kept asking me in interviews or conversations, Gautam, I observed that you spend time with so many different profile of people, from celebrities to renowned authors, to people of different ages, cross cultural. You've lived in London, you've lived in Dubai, you've spent time in India, so you really had a lot of experience with different cultures as well. And so suddenly the topic of breaking bread came up because I was being invited to speak at a speakers conference in Goa, where they said, Gautam, could you come and speak on building relationships? And I didn't want the talk to just be called building relationships. Let me come up with a name which is catchy. And suddenly, from the days in UK where they said breaking bread is a form of connecting with people over breakfast, lunch, dinner. And for me, it's evolved from that to how do you communicate emotionally and engage people. So even on wishing someone happy birthday on over WhatsApp, or people just write happy birthday, and you could receive 100 messages happy birthday. But if you receive a birthday wish on a voice note or a video or a call, that's more memorable. And in today, with people, like, very few people are doing that. I mean, I still get a postcard for Christmas from two particular people till today. And that, to me, I
That's
can't.
very thoughtful.
Very rare, and that's
Right.
breaking bread to me, because you're doing, it's how you communicate. So you communicate with emotion and you're memorable. Otherwise, birthday wishes, New Year wishes, you get so many of them. You're like, I don't
Well,
even know.
you get auto text these days as well, so you
Exactly.
almost know when you're
Yeah.
getting
So
a.
when I take time and send you a voice and I say, "Happy birthday, Rowan. Have an awesome year ahead. Look forward to catching up soon." That will be one of the few which are memorable of that day, whilst you might have 100 wishes. So Breaking Bread was really inspired by this speech I did with the speakers on how to build relationships with people of all ages and all cultures, and I titled it, and I turned that speech into a book, and then I just added true stories from my experiences in it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I see that you have a forward as well by Marshall Goldsmith, so that's incredible.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so
I'm
much.
very happy to receive a copy. Thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, please do give us a like and follow. You can catch up with Gautam on his social media accounts. And again, just remember that change begins with a conversation. So if you're ever in need of a little bit of inspiration, follow us on Boardrooms and Breakthroughs. Thank you.